from our president, Leon Judd, in a second. But we want to, of course, acknowledge the Knights of Columbus who have sponsored this event. We also want to acknowledge the church, obviously, the Holy Family Church, who has wanted to sponsor this event as well. There are handouts in the front row. We have handed out as many as we could, and if you still would like some, they're here afterward. We're happy to announce that this presentation is being recorded, so if you have people that maybe couldn't have made it, it will be up on the website probably tomorrow, the Holy Family website, and they can listen to it. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Leon Judd, who is the president of our affiliate, NAMI, for NAMI Metro, Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. So as Mike said, I'm Leon Judd. I'll talk a little bit more about NAMI throughout the presentation, just to give you a little bit more of an understanding of what the organization is and what services are available through our NAMI Metro affiliate. But the important thing is that NAMI Metro stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and Metro is for Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb counties. So tonight, what I was asked to do was try and put together a presentation, or put a presentation together on the bridges between what NAMI can do and what NAMI does and the church community. This is almost the last day of May, which is Mental Health Month, so I think that was the intent, was to try and get some more information out to the church community. So this is going to be called Bridges of Hope, and it's faith communities in NAMI. And just as an intro, I think it might be smart for me to give a little bit of background on myself, so you understand also a little bit about how the NAMI organization operates. So we work on a basis of lived experience. So we're all volunteers, so we have no building, we have no utilities or salaries. So everything that we do is by volunteers. And mostly all of our volunteers all have one thing in common, and that is there is lived experience amongst all of us. For example, so I'm a family member. I have a loved one with a mental illness, and then we have people like myself, and then we also have people who are in recovery or people who are struggling with a mental health condition, at the time. So a little bit about my story. I'll kind of weave it in and out, I think, as I go through, but because I mentioned that I have lived experience, I have 2 children. I have a daughter and I have a son, and I have 3 grandkids. And so my son is the one who is in my family that has the mental health condition. He was 17 years old. He was a star athlete and academically very strong, and he was accepted at the University of Pittsburgh Honors Engineering School, Engineering Physics, on an academic scholarship. And we dropped him off when he was 17 years old, and in his sophomore year, he had a complete psychotic break. That was my introduction and my wife's introduction to the world of mental illness and what it meant. And those first 5 years after we got him home, we kind of refer to as our living hell and his living hell for those 5 years. You people out there who have some connection with this can understand it. We hear it very often in our family support groups. Stories are very similar. In those 5 years, we had 4 hospitalizations. 2 of those were petitioned with the court, and we had 1 suicide attempt. So again, very common stories for a lot of family members. So you need to understand that mental illness, even though it may affect one person in the family, the entire family is impacted. I mean, if there's siblings involved in the house and so on, it is something that really reaches its tentacles out and kind of affects everybody. So that's just a little bit of background. I wanted you to understand that so you'd have an understanding of where I was coming from as I was going through the presentation. So, what is mental health? We're going to start off with telling you a little bit about what that is and why are faith and spirituality important for people who may be affected by mental health conditions, and then what it is that we can hopefully do to help. And there's where the education comes in terms of educating as many people as we can, because it's the education that's going to stop the stigma that's still pervasive out in the world today. So, as you can see here, 60 million people roughly are impacted by mental illness. That's 1 in 5 people. And they face day-to-day reality of living with a mental health condition. It's NAMI, I'm sorry, went back and forth here. Let's take that back. So NAMI is here to provide a unique support and encouragement. And when I talk about some of the things that we have to offer, it's going to be interesting, hopefully, to you, especially if you have somebody that you know who is in need of support, who is in need of education, and who may be in need of advocacy as it comes to trying to navigate a system that's pretty well broken. So when we ensure that our young people engage, and we want them to engage rather than withdraw in life, and that can be very difficult with somebody who has a serious mental illness. We know that 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by the age of 14, and 75% of those by the age of 24. So it is an early, like I said, my son was 17. He was probably 18, 19 years old when he had his psychotic break. Not uncommon. But the hard issues here is that the third leading cause of suicide between the ages of 10 and 14, and it's the second leading cause of suicide for those between the ages of 14 and 24. It's hard to imagine and believe that young people of that age would ever even consider or think about doing suicide, but it is a fact of life. And I think that since the pandemic, we've seen an increase in a lot of things. Isolation by individuals, non-socialization by individuals, all creating more anxiety, more depression, and as a result of that, more suicide ideation that's going on as well. So, again, second leading cause of death for youth between the ages of 12 and 24. So whatever we've been doing obviously isn't working, because the numbers are going up rather than down. So we need to do a better job of educating people and understanding what it is that they might be able to do in order to prevent some of this from continuing to go on. So what is mental health? Well, first and foremost, mental health conditions are medical conditions. And these health conditions can disrupt a person's thinking, their moods, their abilities, and their ability to relate to other people. It's a very common characteristic for people that have mental health conditions. We always talk about it as mood, thought, and behavior disorders. When we see changes in those things, those are significant signs that someone may need to get some professional help to find out what's happening. Serious mental health conditions include things such as major depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as borderline personality disorder. Where did I go back here? One more. Hold on. So, I don't know why that's happening here. Hold on. Excuse me. Okay. So, the factors that contribute to someone developing a mental health condition can be a myriad of things. We look at these things regularly in terms of what are the warning signs that we might see that may indicate that there's a need to be concerned. It isn't the result of an event or of any one event. There are triggers, and triggers can cause someone who may have a predisposition to a mental health condition to actually go into it. But what we do know, and science is not all that accurate with mental illness, we know that genetics, they say, plays about a 50% role in mental health condition. It's one of the reasons they always ask about family history, Is there any family history on mental health conditions? So those are the things that they look at. They want to know about environmental issues, if there was any trauma early on in one's life. These are things that cause things to happen later on in life that maybe weren't accounted for at the time. But there's some contributing factors as well, stressful jobs, home life, and traumatic life events. All of those things can be contributing factors or things to be concerned about. What we need to understand, though, is that mental health conditions are very, very common. A lot of people don't understand that, probably because there's not a lot of talk about it. But when we talked about that 60 million people, and we talked about 1 in 5 people living with a mental health condition, and 1 in 25 people living with a serious mental health condition, it's pretty serious. We looked at the slide here, and this slide tells you that there's about 18% anxiety and about 7% depression. Again, these are pre-pandemic numbers. I got to believe that since the pandemic, those numbers would probably even be far greater. We've seen it through our phone lines blew up. When the pandemic happened, people were isolated. They're hearing nothing but bad news on the televisions. So it was a bad time for people to get through. I know in my son's case, he went into about, I don't know how many months of depression, but he lives alone. He lives on his own. And it was a bad time for him, for the isolation, not being able to get out, not being able to work, so many things that were contributing to that. One of the things that we need to understand is, how we speak to one another can be a significant factor in helping somebody who may be struggling. One of the things that we talk about with family members in our education classes, as well as in our support groups, is that people with a mental health condition feel that they're being judged constantly, feeling very, very judged. So no matter what you say or what you do, they perceive it as judgment, more so than anybody else. Nobody likes to be judged, but persons with mental health conditions, it's like in spades. So you wonder why it is that they isolate, why it is that they don't talk, why it is that they don't want to work, why it is that they don't want to get out. All of those things could be factors in terms of them just not wanting to be judged by others as they perceive it. So when you look at these cartoons, and there's a couple of them here I'll share with you, it says, I get that you are not feeling well and all, but can you just at least make an effort? And well, sitting around all day obviously isn't helping you. You need to get up and do something. Very common things that get told to people with a mental health condition. One of the reasons I think that this happens is it's not an illness that you can see. It's not like a broken leg or a broken arm. It's not like an x-ray that shows that you've got some sort of a malady. It's an issue that is there by mood, thought, and disorders that you can see, but you can't see the physicalness. So many, many family members, I can tell you, the things that you see on this slide are things that they say to their loved ones. Unknowingly, unwittingly, saying things that aren't necessarily helpful. Dr. Xavier Amador wrote a book, I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help. He talks a lot about a couple of things, but it's a great book if you've not read it for family members. Helps you to understand a couple of things. One of the things that he's developed is this LEAP Institute. Stands for Listen, Empathize, Agree, and Partner. And in this, he says he tried for years to help his schizophrenic brother understand that he had a mental health condition. This is coming from a well-known psychologist. And he never could convince him that he had a mental illness. So he finally switched. He finally said, I'll never ask you again to go to the hospital. I'm never going to talk to you about your mental illness. And he stopped. So what he started to do is he started to create a relationship with his brother. And his brother finally got help. He was taking medications. He was doing all the things that he should be doing. But it wasn't based on him being convinced that he had a mental illness. It was based on the fact that there was a relationship created by his brother and his mother And he did it because of them, not because that he believed he had a mental health condition. He went on to not be hospitalized after that. He ended up getting killed in a car accident where he got hit by a car. But his argument is that family members typically use logic with somebody who is illogical. And for any of you that have dealt with this, I think you can probably appreciate or understand or relate to that, because it doesn't work. Because they're illogical when they're in that state. There isn't much that you're going to say logically that's going to make a difference, so the best thing to do is just listen. So when he talks about listen, empathize, agree, and partner, it is a process for communications that is very helpful in dealing with a loved one who has a mental health condition. So we think of them differently when we see these illnesses, and the other cartoon is, it can't be good for you to take medication every day just to feel normal. Aren't you afraid it will change you and who you are really? And these are things that are said to somebody that probably may be in need of medication. Not everybody is, but a lot of people are, and it has a significant impact, and they understand that it can. So saying these kinds of things is just not helpful when you're dealing with somebody who has got a serious mental illness. So, and again, it talks here about being non-judgmental and shaming. So the things that we say to them are really important. One of the things that we do know is that our loved ones seem to lose a lot of friends when this happens, because I think the friends don't understand what's happened. They see somebody that's different than they knew. So it's a part of that mood change. It's a part of that behavior change. And as a result of that, it may scare people, especially if they're younger. My son had a lot of friends, and he lost all of them when he was initially in that 5-year period, because I think the friends that he did know had no idea who he was. He was so different than he was when he was well before that. It's also good to know what the red flags are, what some of the warning signs are, what some of the symptoms are. So there's a list here of things that's up on the screen that just gives you a list of some of the things that could be indications that something's going on with your loved one and something that you may want to seek out some professional help for. Excessive worrying or fear, feeling excessively sad or low. We're not talking about short periods here. We're talking about if somebody is in a sad period, just crying constantly for 2 weeks or more. That's an indication that you need to find some professional help. Confused thinking or problems concentrating and learning. Extreme mood changes, including uncontrollable highs or feelings of euphoria. Prolonged or strong feelings of irritability or anger. Avoiding friends and social activities. Difficulties understanding or relating to other people. Changes in sleeping habits or feeling tired or low. That could be sleeping too much, or it could be not sleeping at all. My son would go 3 days sometimes without sleeping, just in a manic period where he would just be constantly painting or doing music, whatever. Changes in sleeping habits, difficulty in perceiving reality, abuse of substances like alcohol or drugs. On that topic, we're very concerned about this as a National Alliance on Mental Illness, because we know, and especially in Michigan now that they've legalized marijuana, family members in our support groups constantly are talking about the amount of marijuana that their loved ones are using, or alcohol. We know from a scientific standpoint that if you are using any of those things, it negates the benefits of any of your psychotropic meds that you may be taking. So it's like, well, why are you even taking the medications if they're going to just be wasted as a result of drug use? Not everybody can use marijuana. Some people can, and there's good uses for that, depending on what their illnesses are. But it's a mind-altering drug, and it's just not recommended by NAMI, that's for sure. Multiple physical ailments without obvious cause, such as headaches, stomach aches, vague and ongoing aches and pains, and thinking about suicide. That's that word that keeps coming up to us all the time. But even with all of that, you need to understand that there is hope. NAMI likes to really promote the idea of hope. And we try to use as many examples of hope when so many people feel hopeless. In those first 5 years, my wife and I felt absolutely hopeless. We felt helpless because we didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know where to turn. We couldn't find a doctor. All the things that family members go through. And then when you did find one, you couldn't get any information because of HIPAA, whatever it was. They just didn't want to communicate to you. So here you are feeling even more hopeless, wanting to be a part of this treatment team that's working on your loved one, but being held out of the partnership, if you will. So every year, people who struggle with mental illness conditions overcome challenges. They do things that they enjoy. Recovery and wellness sometimes seem over and involve a variety of factors, including self-learning, peer support work, and school finding the right supports. So as I'm talking about hope on this slide, I wanted to at least relate that I talked about those first 5 years of living hell, and then 4 hospitalizations and a suicide attempt. The 4th hospitalization, my son had 7.5 weeks in the hospital. Almost unheard of today. In those 7.5 weeks, I believe, he's not told me this, but I believe this, and that is he saw the same people come in and go out, come in and go out, come in and go out of the hospital. It was like a revolving door. And I think the light bulb went off in his head that this is not what he wanted to have happen. So even though there is this thing called anosognosia, and a lot of people think it's that your loved one or somebody with a mental illness is in denial of their illness, and it's not denial. It is this symptom called anosognosia, which means they lack insight. They truly don't have any insight to the fact that they're even ill. And as a result of that, why would you want to get treatment? Why would you want to get care? There's no reason for it, because there's nothing wrong with me. Typically, it's nothing wrong with me, it's you. We hear that often. But anyway, after those 7.5 weeks in the hospital and him coming out, he decided that there was something wrong. He didn't know what it was, but he was willing to finally do something about it. So he did connect up with a psychiatrist while he was in the hospital. He's been with that same psychiatrist now for 30 years, I guess, which is also unheard of. Doesn't normally happen. But he got educated by this psychiatrist about the illness, not about him, not about his illness, but about the illness. He was diagnosed probably 5 different diagnoses over those 5 years, which is also not uncommon. But the hope piece of this is here. And that is, he went back to school after he found the right medications, got on the right treatment plan. He went back to school, he got his undergraduate degree. He went back to school, he got his master's degree. He's a cybersecurity analyst today, and he has served the automotive industry, aerospace, and Department of Defense. So we want people to know that there's hope. It's not hopeless, although it seems hopeless at the time. You just got to keep trying and finding the right things to do, finding the right supports for you, finding the right supports for your loved one. So anyway, just don't ever lose sight of hope, because it is there, and we hear it from family members in our support groups on a regular basis. Not all of them, and not everyone has good success stories, but my son is 48 today. He's gone through a lot. Those first 5 years were horrible. He believes, quite honestly, when his break with reality happened all of a sudden while at school, and he believed that it was a religious experience. That was what was happening to him. And probably today he would even tell you the same thing, that he felt like it was a religious experience, although he knows it wasn't now, but at the time that's what he thought it was. So a lot of spiritual questions come up for family members as well as for our loved ones. And they can include things such as up on the slide, which is, where is God in all of this? Why did you allow this to happen? You know, why do bad things happen to good people? Here was my son, who had been an excellent student, athlete, never a bit of problems, and all of a sudden this came out of the blue. Just couldn't ever figure out why that happened. You know, and how can my faith help, and what's next? How will I cope, and how will I manage this through my spirituality? So there's a lot of different things that go on, but these questions do come up not only to the family members like myself, but they also come up to the individuals who have the mental health condition. My son happens to be very, very spiritually connected now, and has been for some time. And there was a period of time where he was challenging himself in his questioning of his faith. My wife and I did exactly the same thing. Couldn't understand what was going on, why was this happening. And maybe because my calling was to be here talking to you today. I mean, I'm not sure, but I certainly wouldn't have been here today had it not been for the fact that my son got ill. I wouldn't know anything at all about mental illness because it hit us like a bolt of lightning out of the sky. Faith communities do have a significant role for a lot of reasons. Many of the people will turn to their church first because it's a safe place. They're familiar with the people that are there. They're familiar with their clergy. And it's accessible and it's available, so it's close. It's something that they're familiar with, something that they're comfortable with, and something that they feel confident in terms of saying anything about anything in terms of what's going on with them. So with that, obviously the churches have a significant role. I'd like to tell you one story. Fortunately, it doesn't happen too often, but we've had in our support group a person say that their loved one had been under treatment, had been doing okay, had been on medication, was in therapy, and was seeing a psychiatrist. And they went to their church, and he went to his church, and this was not recent. This was some time ago. And he was told to just stop taking his medications, go home and pray, and everything will be just fine. Well, about 3 weeks later, he was back in the hospital again, and so that plan didn't work out too well. But I can say that things have really changed in terms of the faith community. We're getting calls on a regular basis to come out and speak with faith community. I just was at a place where I had to do an educational session with 5 clergy from various denominations. And so there's a real understanding that, you know, mental health is real, mental illnesses are real, and there's a place for the faith community to play a role in helping those individuals that may approach them. One of the things that NAMI does is they have this program where there's a pledge, and it's a pledge is simple and it's stigma-free. And it's got 3 steps to it. It's very little that people have to do other than learn about mental illness, see the person yourself, not the illness, and then take action. And if you want, you can go to nami.org/stigma-free, and you'll find a lot more information about this pledge that NAMI is trying to run across the country. And it's gaining momentum, and it's gaining favor by a whole lot of people. So what can we do, and then how can we act on this? Well, in addition to pledging to stigma-free, congregations provide a place to belong and experience hope by learning more about mental illness. They can help others on their journeys, and they can be someone who will walk across that bridge to greet them, to be a friend. Sometimes the best medicine in the world for someone with a mental illness is to just have a friend. Somebody that'll listen, not necessarily give them advice or counsel, but just somebody that they can talk to. Because a lot of those friends have walked out, over their lives. So it's one of the things that, we consider as really important. So when we talked earlier about being mindful about what it is that we say to our loved ones and how we say it because of that judgmental piece that I believe is there. So instead of saying certain things, and we correct people all the time because of the stigma, you know, when we say she is bipolar, well, she isn't bipolar, or he is schizophrenic, he isn't schizophrenic. We should be saying things like, he lives with schizophrenia, or she has bipolar disorder. You see the subtle difference between the two. They are not their illness. They are an individual first who happens to have an illness. You would never talk that way about somebody who has cancer or diabetes or other illnesses. You would always refer to them as a first person first, connected with a disorder that they have. You should always do that also with somebody who has got a mental health condition or a mental health diagnosis. Putting the person first helps them feel like they're a person still and that they're not their illness. So, and also instead of saying the mentally ill, we can say they struggle with mental illness or it's a mental health condition. These are things that hopefully over time are going to change the dialogue that people have with people with mental health conditions. We're seeing some of it now on television. I think there's a lot more going on where we have people stepping up talking about their mental health conditions much more prominently than they have in the past, which is a positive sign. I can tell you when we speak in the middle schools and the high schools, these kids are far more advanced and non-stigmatized with mental illness in many cases, especially the middle schoolers. They ask a ton of questions. They're wide open to conversation about mental illness. High schoolers are still a little sheepish about raising their hand and talking about mental illness, but they do it. And they do a lot of summits and conferences and so on in their schools to bring forth the whole idea of mental illness. The other item on this that we should talk about is suicide. We've talked about it a number of times, but we need to understand that so many people use those words, they committed suicide, okay? Rather than saying they died by suicide or they lost their life as a result of suicide. It is a subtle distinction between the two, but when we think of the word committed, we think of either a crime or something else, which is a very negative thing. So we try and stay away from the word committed and use a term that's maybe more acceptable and more understandable, and it's softer for the whole society to think about it, because suicide is a big issue. So avoiding labels is also very important. So one of the things that we can do, another easy step that we can do, is to reach out into an individual or a family. You know, of course, it's good to ask permission before you do that, but there are some ways that you can do that. Ease into the conversation gradually. It may be that the person is not in a place to talk, and that's okay. Greeting them and extending a gentle kindness can go a long way. Sometimes less is even more. Like I talked earlier, we talked about LEAP, it's all about listening, probably the most important skill that we can have, rather than trying to jump in and solve a problem, rather than to listen. Offer your support and connect them to help if you feel that they need it. Ask, how can I help? Simple, how can I help? Maybe all that's needed to get the person on the right road to recovery. Or even, can I pray with you, if that's appropriate. There are steps that we can take also to ensure more inclusivity in welcoming into the faith community. There's a checklist here of a number of items, but always keep in mind that a person living with a mental illness is a person first. Check in with the person or their family. Ask them what would be the most helpful thing you could do. Invite the family to sit with you at church services or events. Make an effort to talk to them and show that you care and understand. Offer to pray with them and for them. Offer a place to belong, a small spiritual support fellowship group. Offer to cook a meal, run an errand, or any other helpful task. Plan a home visit, learn about mental health, convey a message. There's sort of an ongoing, I don't want to say joke within the mental health community with families, but you know, the comment always is that this is not a casserole illness. Any other illnesses that go on, if you got cancer, you got anything to happen, somebody gets injured, neighbors are coming over with casseroles and bringing food. It seems like nobody comes over when it deals with mental illness. We got to change that. You know, we got to be more welcoming to people that maybe are in this struggle. Nobody wants to have a mental illness. Families that have somebody in their family that has a mental illness, it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle. People sometimes reject them, friends that they had, and sometimes the family members themselves feel like they had some role in all of this, so they therefore kind of stay away from friends, stay away from family. We've had family members who told us that, you know, their loved one had been ill for a number of years, and they hadn't even told their parents yet. So that's stigma. The fear of just talking about what's really happening. So take a look at what others have done. There's an example here of hope, but it also comes from Saddleback Church, which is in Orange County in California. And they've provided a number of things that churches and the community can do. And they put it into 3 categories. And it's kind of an interesting approach that they've used. And they says, there's this walk category, there's this crawl category, and then there's this run category. Each one of those get obviously a little bit more difficult in terms of what it may take to do these things. So in the first one, under crawl, this doesn't require money, training, resources, or paid staff. They are beginner steps. All churches can use these crawl steps that are up here. Refer to mental health within the sermons or in the homilies. Within weekend services, pray for people who are living with mental health conditions and their families. Give your congregation a survey that asks them questions related to mental health. Provide a referral list of mental health resources available in your community. There's NAMI Talk is on here as one. Educate and raise awareness in your congregation by inviting mental health professionals, family members, and individuals to speak about mental health. You're doing that right here tonight. Provide space for the NAMI support groups to meet at your church. So NAMI Metro has a number of family support groups throughout the Tri-County area, as well as actually the one that we have for Peer Connection is in Farmington Hills. So we have those support groups. Take a meal to someone newly diagnosed with mental illness, befriend somebody living with mental health conditions, and go to a movie together, or just simply get a cup of coffee. Give hope to people who are struggling with their mental health condition by providing encouraging connections. Very important, but again, that's the crawl status. Then they moved on and they says there's also this other one called the walk, which is a little bit more inclusive, but it requires some training and minimal financial support. There's a greater level of commitment that has to be provided by the church. But, you know, have the clergy, leadership, or pastor speak specifically about mental illness. Start mental health specific ministries, such as support groups for adults and for youth. Create care teams of 3 or 4 individuals who will commit to an ongoing relationship to an individual or family to help with basic needs, helping with household tasks, transportation to doctor's visits, basic home repairs. Train volunteers to be companions during a church or faith service to anyone appearing distressed, depressed, or lonely. Sometimes, again, it's only a friend. It's all they need, just an ear. Regularly connect your church members to opportunities to serve. Help connect people in your congregation who have similar mental health challenges with their permission. Build a mental health library and books and resources and have those available. Use local mental health professionals, family members, and individuals, or other frequent educational meetings for your staff, volunteers, and parents. So that's the walk. Then we get into the run. So it's a little bit more intensive. It requires a higher level of commitment. It's more extensive in terms of its financial support, its training, but you can integrate mental health into existing ministries within the faith community. You can develop a lay counseling resource or ministry, hold mental health support groups for children, create a mental health safe space where people who are living with mental health conditions can come and find comfort and support. Provide staff with more advanced mental health care training. Create care teams of 3 or 4 individuals who will commit to an ongoing relationship to an individual or family to help with mental health needs. Assist them in making connections to resources such as NAMI and other agencies that are out there and available. Partner together with a local mental health organization in your community to ensure that triage to mental health services and supports is accessible. Hold a mental health ministry event. Host a one-day mental health conference. Build a team of volunteers who can help others in your community to become involved in caring for people living with mental illness and their families. Become a model of what every church, synagogue, or faith community can do about mental illness by being a reliable source of information about mental health conditions. So those are 3 of the things that have been put together by the Saddleback Church, and they've taken this walk, crawl, and run methodology and these ideas across the country. So NAMI is using these probably in all of the states right now as they're doing programs such as this, talking to faith communities. So, again, you can find links to a lot of this stuff on NAMI.org. It's a great resource in terms of illnesses, in terms of treatments, in terms of observations and programs that are available. So, now that we've talked about mental health conditions and how to help people and families affected by mental illness, I want to tell you a little bit more about NAMI. So I started a little bit earlier talking about it, but haven't really talked about it. This slide here kind of gives you a good image of who NAMI is. So NAMI is the largest grassroots mental health organization in the country. It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It was founded in 1979. Interestingly enough, it was started by a couple of mothers who had loved ones with a mental illness who started out on their porch just talking together, started bringing other people in. In 1979, it became founded as NAMI. So we're a national organization. We got state organizations in every single state in the country, and there are 900 local affiliates. Maybe a few more now, but we're one of those 900 affiliates across the state of Michigan. They're all laid out by county, so it's easy to find them. As long as you know which county you're looking for, you can find it on NAMI.org, or if you're in Michigan, you can just go to NAMI Michigan, and then you can just look under affiliates, and it'll be by the county that you're looking for. So in Michigan, for example, we have 14 affiliates right now, with I think 3 more that are looking to become affiliates in the very near future. So everything from the UP down through here in the eastern part of Michigan, we have NAMI Metro to do a lot of that stuff. So what is it that we do? NAMI's mission overall is to improve the lives of those who are affected by mental illness. When we say lives who are affected by, that includes the family, because the family's lives are clearly affected just as much as the individual who has the illness. It may be in a different way, but it certainly affects everyone. So what do? Well, we educate. We offer thousands of communities across the country educational programs. Some of those are NAMI signature programs that come strictly out of NAMI National. They train people to run those programs. And then there are also homebred programs that are put together. So when I talk about education, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But then we also advocate. So we shape some of the public policy that gets put into place, not as much as we would like, but we're constantly, probably constantly in a battle with trying to fix a broken system that doesn't seem to be working so well for people who are struggling with a mental health condition. And we help the families as well as the others through our grassroots volunteers. The other is we advocate not only for public policies, but we also provide tools to our grassroots volunteers to be able to fulfill their requirements in terms of doing some of the education and some of the support that we have going on. We also listen. We provide support in a number of ways. We are a no-cost, peer-led support groups offered by trained volunteer facilitators who have the unique perspective, son of a gun, I keep going up, who have a unique perspective because, as I said earlier, everything that we do is through lived experience. Family members, education and support, have a family member who's got a loved one with a mental illness, and then also individuals who are in recovery are trained to facilitate and run support groups for individuals themselves who have a mental illness. We also have other programs called Ending the Silence that we take into middle schools and high schools. We also have a program called In Our Own Voice, which takes two people who are in recovery, and they follow a national NAMI signature program, but they tell their stories. And it's an anti-stigma story. It's an anti-stigma from the standpoint that these individuals get up and they talk about what's going on with them, what happened, where they are now, where they want to be. And you would never know that these are individuals who have a mental health diagnosis. So anyway, we also lead in public awareness, a lot of events that we've done in April and May because it's Mental Health Month. Lots and lots of people, especially since the pandemic, have been reaching out, wanting to have us come either at some sort of a resource event, some sort of a summit, or just to come and speak to their businesses, their churches, whatever. So this is NAMI Metro, Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb. That's our website. It's real simple. It's namimetro.org. And I've given you a lot already about who we are. We have a family education class. It's 10 weeks. It's 10 consecutive Wednesdays. We have put almost 3,000 family members through our 10-week family education program. It is life-changing for many family members. They tell us that in the evaluations afterwards. They had no idea that there was such education available. I can tell you that my wife and I, when we started this back in 2008, it was because we weren't given any information. We had no idea what to do, where to go. We said it shouldn't be that way for family members. There should be a place for them to get the education they need, find out what resources are available, find out more about how to better effectively communicate with their loved one who's got a mental illness, what kinds of things are available in terms of Social Security disability, where can they go to get help. Those are questions that weren't answered years ago. So things have changed, and I think family members, I can tell you the first Families in Action class that we held, most of the family members that were there, their loved one had been ill, I'm going to say between 25 and 35 years. So this was an older population, and their question was, where have you been? And the answer was, there wasn't anything like this before. They didn't have these kinds of educational programs available. The good news today, now when we do a class or we do a support group, most of the families that are coming in, their loved one has been ill 6 months, a year, hasn't been very long, okay? Not like 25 or 30 years. And the solution, or part of the solution to our problem, is early intervention. Early identification and early intervention is critical to preventing somebody from getting seriously mentally ill. The earlier we can identify it through some of those red flags that I talked about earlier, those are the kinds of things that you can get people to the professional help that they may need in order to lead a productive life and be in recovery. So, we all have the opportunity to help raise awareness that mental illness is not the result of a personal weakness or lack of character. Many people still believe that. Repeat that again. We have the opportunity to help raise awareness that mental illness is not the result of personal weakness or lack of character. Isn't that the truth? Knowing the facts about mental health conditions can help inspire oops, I'm sorry, I went back again. Knowing the facts about mental health conditions can help inspire others and make harmful, stigmatizing stereotypes a thing of the past. Wouldn't that be nice? Still waiting for that to happen. To build a mental health movement, we need to all to learn, see, and take action. We can have, as a faith community, we can raise awareness to help ensure that we are a welcoming, caring congregation for those in need. So if you think back on that walk, crawl, and run, there was many things on there that can be done very easily that helps to raise awareness, helps get people comfortable. So it's time that to stand up and take steps. They can be small steps, they can be large steps. Some questions to consider is we all need to be reminded sometimes that you could make a difference. It may only take one person to be able to make a difference. If you can make a difference in one person's life, you've done a lot. So if you can do it in 2 people's lives, you can even do more. So we have about 30 people here tonight, and hopefully we can change 30 people's lives. And you'll take it and change another 30 people's lives, and we'll just keep building on from there to changing this world and allowing mental health to be treated the same as any other illness. There are members in your congregation and families that have the ability to make a lot of these changes. We don't want to ignore the cries, also for help, because there's a lot of those cries that are out there still happening. And when we think about NAMI and we think about FaithNet, we think about the Bridges to Hope, we think about these things, it isn't a program. It isn't something you just come in and you develop a program for, but it's a clearinghouse of information, grassroots initiatives, and it's a way to help encourage and be supportive in our faith communities. I think NAMI Metro wants to be supportive to the faith community. We're trying to do that every place that we can, every place that we get called. Some places we've created support groups for the congregations that can really be helpful. Again, I go back to that initial saying where we talked about this is a safe place. People come here because it's safe. Having people come to a support group in a place like this that it's safe can have a huge impact on the community. Anyway, so I'm really grateful to be able to be called in here. Roxanne got a hold of me and Mike Buwati wanted us to talk a little bit about mental health and the church. And so I'm pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to answer any questions that I can. And our information is here up in terms of we have a helpline that's answered by a volunteer, and then our administrative line is also a helpline that's answered by a volunteer, me. And so we do have some resources that are available, and those resources are free. Our programs are free, so there's no reason to not be able to join. There is a membership fee if you want to join. I think you got a brochure. With that, you should understand that by joining NAMI Metro, NAMI National is the one that establishes the membership fees. So there's a $60 household fee a year, $40 regular fee, or a $5 open door fee. That's to make sure that anybody who wants to join can if they can't financially do it. So it's lined up pretty well for everybody to join. But what you get is you get a quarterly printed newsletter from NAMI Metro, gets sent to you. You'll get and we also have constant contact that goes out. NAMI Michigan sends out an electronic newsletter regularly to its members. You're automatically a member of NAMI Michigan, and you're automatically a member of NAMI National. So you get communications from NAMI National, from NAMI Michigan, and from NAMI Metro. The best communications is from NAMI Metro. Everybody's supposed to laugh at that. But it is, we got a lot of people that work really hard who are volunteers. And the reason, I've been asked this question by a number of outside organizations is, why is there this passion, for this? And the volunteers are passionate because of that lived experience. They know what it's like. They've been there, they feel it, and they have answers that professionals don't have. But professionals also have answers that the lived experience people don't have either. So you need both. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody might have. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We don't have that approval yet, but I wanted to let that out if, it's with Roxanne's help, and if there's a need and there's an interest level, we would start some sort of group like that in the fall. When we would stop, obviously, when Thanksgiving comes around and maybe pick it up in January. But if we don't have that approval from the leaders of the church, we have other support groups, and we could talk about how many we have.
Yeah, so we have, I think, 7 family support groups right now. If you go to namimetro.org and you look on the announcements page, click on the announcements page, it'll give you a list of every single support group that we have, when they meet, what time they meet, if they're meeting online, which some of them still are, or if they're meeting in person. It'll give you all that information right there, and as well as a contact person for each of those. And then again, we have one peer-led connection support group. Before the pandemic, we had 10 family support groups and we had 6 peer-led connection support groups. What we found out was that not everybody was comfortable doing the virtual support groups, so that was fine. So we still have 6 family support groups, which provides a lot of opportunity for anybody. What we also found out was that it was helpful in a number of other ways. We had family members living in a different state whose loved one was here in Michigan, in our counties. And they were connected through our virtual support groups because they wanted to be able to understand and figure out how it is that they could best help their loved one, support them here in Michigan. The other is we had older people who didn't drive at night. And so it was a way for them to be connected because most of our support groups are about 7 o'clock at night. So we're hoping to get back. We've gotten a few of them back live, face-to-face. but I think we'll always have at least one virtual support group, so people will have the opportunity to connect with the support group if they want to. So if anybody out there is interested in a support group in the interim, check out NAMImetro.org, go to the announcements page, and it'll give you all the information you need.
The support groups are for people who have someone, or they're for the person who is dealing with mental health or their families.
So we have two different types of support groups. The family support group is for the family members or friends who have a loved one with a mental illness. That's separate. Then we have this other group that's called Connection Peer-Led Support Groups. That is for individuals who have a diagnosis, or maybe they don't even have a diagnosis, but they're dealing with the illness. The reason for that is fairly simple, I think, and that's the way NAMI created it. But we found that family members who come to a support group who are looking for help, trying to understand from other family members who are going through similar things, they feel a little restricted in saying things bluntly when they know that there's somebody in that group that has a mental health condition. Does that make sense? So that's why they're separate.
My other question was, you mentioned a book.
A what?
Book.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sick, I don't need help, is one of the books by Dr. Xavier Amador. It should be a must-read by all family members who've got a loved one. The other one, NAMI has just created its first book by Dr. Ken Duckworth, who is the medical director for NAMI National, and its title is You Are Not Alone. Excellent read, excellent book. You can get it, I think, virtually as well.
The other thing I really want to reiterate is the Families in Action, which I know has been already discussed. We already have a couple that have gone through that actually here in the group. I can certainly have them talk, or I can talk about it. But again, it's a 10-week course, probably once a week. It's only offered twice a year, spring and the fall, and I believe that you got upwards of 40 people or 40 into families members.
No, that's a lot. We had, the most I think that we ever had was this last time, we had 34 people.
So you had 34.
So
but that
it used
was
to be we had to restrict it to 20 to 25 when they were in person.
Right.
Just because of space.
But it's so well accepted and it's so well done. And the topics that they talk about are things like stigma. I think you talk a lot about, of course, the medications that possibly that individual might be on.
Dealing with difficult behaviors is one
Behavior
section.
styles, yeah.
Community resources is a whole section. Communications is a whole section. Grieving is a whole section. So, yeah, we've had some people that I know in the audience here who have gone through it. So,
Yeah.
I have two questions. The first one is, does NAMI have Spanish speakers to help? And the second, is NAMI only located in the U.S.?
no, it is international. So I'm not sure exactly what countries it is, but it is international. Most of their programs have been translated into Spanish as well. But having Spanish speakers, we have one person, I think, in our group that can speak Spanish. I can tell you that, to tell you how we go to help, we were approached by a Portuguese group because they were working from General Motors. I had no idea that there were so many Portuguese people that were brought over. And it's what? Mass twice a week from here. But this was in Troy, and they approached us and said they would like to do a family support group. So I said, fine, let's figure out how to do that. We translate, and there's a difference between Spanish and Portuguese. So we translated everything into Portuguese, and we then made all the posters and everything made up in Portuguese. Funny story is I took it to the printer, and I says, okay, I says, before you print this, I want to make sure you proofread it. And he just looked at me with a bewildered look and didn't do it. But they were running this Portuguese support group out of Troy for some time. I think that during the pandemic, things changed a little bit for them. They were doing it out of a church that they had, but they had a very large population of Portuguese people, and I know your church has a large population of Hispanics as well. You even have a special mass for Spanish as well, every week. Yeah. Actually, if you had somebody from your parish that wanted to volunteer who could speak Spanish, we could connect them up with the family support group people, and it would work out probably really well.
I believe it was you, right, that came up to me a couple of years ago, or maybe it was not, no? Somebody had come up to me saying, hey, I'd like to teach, be part of the support group, but I want to do it in Spanish. So we were thinking about it, but then, of course, COVID hit, and that just knocked us out completely. But, you know, that's a possibility here if that's something the Leadership Council wants.
I can tell you one of the things about support groups that it does, it's different than therapy, obviously, but you're getting a lot of really good information from people who have been there or are in the midst of it all. And for us, as people who would run a support group, it's like therapy. Because you kind of forget sometimes how far your loved one has come or how far you have come in this process. So it is very, very encouraging. I talked about this religious thing is where's God in all of this, and you wonder what happened. But I can tell you that those 3,000 family members that we've taught, I wouldn't have been there to teach them if this hadn't happened with my son. I've got to look at it very positively that this was meant to be, and he's doing so well, I couldn't be more proud of him. But those first 5 years, we never would have expected he would ever be able to do anything at all. I mean, he was that sick, but doing just great today.
Do you have peer groups for teenagers?
We do not have teenager groups. NAMI, it's a question that I've got with NAMI nationally. It appears as if they're trying to do more with the youth. I think it's a legal issue. I think all of our groups are 18 and older, and I think that's the reason. But what we do is we refer people through our resources to places that do work with teens. So there are agencies out there that do, and we don't hesitate at all to tell you if they're good or bad, at least from the information that we get from other family members.
Any other questions at all?
Hi. So I am on staff at a different church, and we do have people that sometimes come to the pastor for help, and sometimes he comes to us for information. And I do have a help resources page on our website where I find out about things. NAMI is up there. And so I'm always kind of reticent about recommending certain agencies to people because I really don't know, and you know, I don't, their liability and all of that. But so if I pointed people to NAMI for help, if they're looking for help for a loved one,
Yeah.
you would be able to at least give them some direction?
We do the best we can, but we do it all the time. I have to tell you that we have psychiatrists and therapists that refer people to us.
Okay. Good to know.
So, I mean, it's silly, but they do because they understand what we offer is so different than what they offer, and they only give them 15 minutes, right? So they don't get a lot of time. So, yeah, definitely feel free to refer them to us. You can refer them to either one of those 2 phone numbers that are on there, and we'll get them. That's part of our advocacy, is getting them connected with the right people. And we get a lot of feedback from family members to telling us what's working well and what's not working well, and we can tell them that. We can say, well, we've heard that this place is really good because, you know, the social workers at this particular hospital have been very good at communicating with family members. A lot of places, that's not the case at all. So, yeah, feel free. Mike, question down there?
Spring and fall,
the 10-week courses are in the
Yes.
spring and in the fall. Has the spring one already started?
The spring one is finished.
Oh, okay,
The fall one is going to be in September.
okay.
And so, yeah, just get a hold of us. There's a waiting list. So it's not a waiting list yet, but we call it a waiting list. I think we have about 12 people already on the list for the fall. So just, if you just, all you have to do is email leonj@namimetro.org, or you can just, no, do it to me, leonj@namimetro.org. Just give me your name, address, phone number, and email, and I'll get you on the list. Just email it to me, and I'll respond back to you telling you that I've gotten your message and you're on the list.
Okay, is that email address on here anywhere? The handouts?
Is it on there? I'm not sure.
No, I have a pen, but
I'll tell you what, I have a card.
great, I'll take one.
The what? Definitely. We tell people all the time that call and they're caught in between the spring and fall class or afterwards is just exactly what Sherry is saying. And that is, go to a support group. In the meantime, it'll provide you that interim level of support that you may need, and you may get a lot of really good information, and you may also hear from other people that have been through Families in Action already, and they can give you their opinion as to whether or not they think it would work for you or not. I haven't found anybody who says it doesn't work for them yet.
Plus, joining NAMI for $5 a year, you get, again, each quarter, 4 quarters in a row, you're going to get a beautiful newsletter, which, again, has some excellent information, scientific research, as well as all the emails you'd ever want from our NAMI Metro organization listed there. So it's very well laid out. Leanne does a great job, and so does the rest of our writing crew.
Thank you. I have been getting a magazine called Brain Life for a good number of years now, and I can't. I'm drawing a blank as to who puts it out. But I was wondering, is NAMI I've not seen it. Maybe I've missed it. Is NAMI advertised in that? It's about all kinds.
What's the name of it again?
Brain Life.
Brain Life.
It's been around for years, and I think it used to be called something else before that. Brain Neurology. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
It's okay.
But yeah.
Sounds like it may have been one of Tom Coles' organizations that,
The magazine's been around forever.
yeah.
Great magazine, a lot of good information on brain disorders of various sorts, like, dementias and so forth, but also what we're talking about here tonight.
Okay.
And I wondered if,
We don't, I don't advertise in any magazines. So, I mean, we're out there, by word of mouth mostly.
okay, thank you.
And
So that's it.
okay.
Any questions? We do have handouts here. Again, if you'd like to take some home, again, if people have used QR codes and you want to go to our podcast, our national podcast, they're all archived on various topics, different types of treatment, different types of diagnoses. They're excellent. It's done by our national organization. So
The CEO of NAMI National does those podcasts. They're very, very good. A lot of really good recent information from him, and it's on the blue side of that little card. On the other side is the QR code for NAMI Metro's website. Both of those are good pieces of information. NAMI also has if anybody's interested, anybody's a golfer, our largest fundraiser is a golf fundraiser. This is an interesting story, actually, so I'm going to tell it. So it's the last Sunday of July, and it was put on by a person who was in our very first Families in Action class. He came there, and he was there because of his son, and we didn't hear from him for, I'm going to say, 3 years or 4 years after he had left the class and had graduated. And we got a call, and he says, you know, I just put together this small little fundraiser to get some money to help pay for a computer equipment that this kid needed for college. And I have a little bit of money left, and I would like to give it to you. I said, well, let me think about that. I said, okay. So anyway, he presented, and he says, and now what I want to do is, he says, I want to do a fundraiser, a golf fundraiser for NAMI Metro, and that has been 18 years now. This is the 18th year that he's done that. It is our largest fundraiser. It's at Fox Hills in Plymouth, and you can go to skinsandpins.org. All the information is on there. It is a fun day. It is just a lot of fun, and it's not a real costly thing. There's all kinds of prizes and awards that are given out, and silent auctions, live auctions. But trust me, if you go, you will have a good time. The other thing that we have, the only other thing that we have for a fundraiser is the NAMI Walk. That's in September. It's going to be at Wayne State University again this year. And you'll find information on our website as we get closer to that date. But it's a fun day, too. We got a lot of people that come out there. And Mike, who is dressed, he is our mascot, by the way. We have a giant skunk costume that he wears for Stigma Stinks. And he wears Stigma Stinks on his shirt. And as a matter of fact, we were just out Friday at an event at Jimmy John's Field, and Stinky was there in his glory. He came out and helped me throw out the first pitch. So he did, yeah, right down in the dirt. But I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for your attention and your questions. And if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to call either of those 2 numbers that are up there. Okay? Thank you.